The Washington Post is out with a list of the top 10 potential Democratic presidential candidates for 2024. It includes names ranging from Pete Buttigieg to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It comes after a poll from YouGov shows when asked about the 2024 primary, only 21% of Democrats said they would pick President Biden. It's just barely above the 18% who said they weren't sure who was going to get their vote.
The top 3 candidates chosen by the Post, you guessed it, Vice President Kamala Harris, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, and of course, President Biden. Now,
Pete ahead of Harris. God, her people got to be furious about that.
I mean, the reality is, I think that no one in Washington is defending or pretending that she hasn't been a real sore spot for the Biden administration.
I thought President Biden, while he did a good job during his first term, should either be primaried or he should decide not to run. America has had a chance to take a deep breath. Part of the reason that Joe Biden was picked was because he was the best person to run against Trump. Now I think people are trying to figure out who's the next person that can take us into a new segment of American history. And I think that's got to be someone who's young, someone who can both be charismatic, but also be honest with America.
The Washington Post recently put out a list of a way too early list of the top 10 Democratic presidential nominees for the upcoming 2024 election. Your normal people from the last cycle are all in there, but I think what was interesting was the ranking order that they had, in which they placed Pete Buttigieg above Kamala Harris. Now, that might surprise a lot of people who were sort of casually paying attention to this stuff, but it shouldn't really surprise you if you've been paying attention to the tea leaves. Now, to be sure, Kamala Harris has definitely gained a name recognition and I guess you could say popularity since she last ran in 2020, but I don't think many of the factors that rendered her candidacy so wholly irrelevant have changed. I think most of that stuff largely remains the same.
And it's about economic justice. It's about justice for children. It's about justice for our teachers. I could go on down the list. And so the issue really is not what is the fight. The issue has to be how we're going to win.
I think back in 2020, a lot of people thought that she would be a formidable candidate because on paper, she sort of ticked off all the traditional boxes that the establishment loved, right? Like she had the quote unquote resume in jobs that she held as far as, district attorney or prosecutor. Of course, she was the senator from one of probably the biggest state in the union as far as population, California. And so, she's a black woman. She checked off the identity boxes. This is stuff that traditional Democrats seem to love. However, in practice, her campaign never really got off the ground. She never got out of single digits in polling support, and she basically stalled out very quickly and famed out hilariously. And there were many factors for that, I believe. I would say the 2 main factors of why Kamala Harris couldn't get anything going. The first one is that her resume that was supposed to be a strength became a weakness, right? With all the chat amongst the Democrats about prison reform and sentencing reform and criminal justice reform, her history as a prosecutor, putting moms behind bars for truancy stuff and things like that, that became a hindrance. So her resume that was supposed to be a strength ended up being used against her. Another thing that people don't really talk about enough is how cynical her campaign was. She wasn't somebody that came in like, all right, here's what I believe in, here's where I stand. She was somebody who was constantly testing the winds, right? Seeing which direction the wind was blowing. It's like, all right, that's where I'm going to go. She never really had an actual platform or anything that she actually stood for. She was just doing the cynical thing of seeing like, oh, let me hop on this one. Oh, let me hop on that one. Oh, healthcare seems to be popular. Oh, this one seems to be popular. And that just didn't work out for her. I think voters saw through that tactic. And lastly, I would say that that campaign ended up coming down to, in large part, a popularity contest. And she had no name recognition. So she had no policy to stand on. She had no name recognition. And her resume was killing her. This time around, she has a better name recognition. Obviously, being the vice president, that just makes you a lot more recognizable. However, this is not going to work in the way that it did for Joe Biden, in the sense that Barack Obama is still an extremely popular person in Democratic Party circles, right? He's basically reached sainthood in that way, in a way that Joe Biden just hasn't. And, proximity to Joe Biden's presidency is not going to do the wonders that it did for it's not going to do the wonders for Kamala Harris in the way that it did for Joe Biden, being so proximate to Barack Obama. So it doesn't surprise me that she's not getting a lot of traction. And quite frankly, she doesn't seem to be popular amongst the cool kids in the Democratic Party establishment. I don't think they're really feeling her like that if you're reading the tea leaves behind the scenes. So you shouldn't be surprised that Kamala Harris's presidential campaign thrust isn't as crazy as one would think.